Hello fellow taxpayers and welcome to Marty Mar News, where today we're donning our finest hazmat suits and spelunking into the fetid, overflowing dumpster fire that is government waste. That's right folks, we're talking about your hard-earned dollars, the ones you meticulously scraped off the sidewalk after tax season, being funneled directly into a money incinerator the size of Delaware. Now I know, talking about government waste is about as exciting as watching paint dry on C-SPAN, but stick with me here because this isn't your grandma's boring budget breakdown. Oh no, we've got our very own four-legged, meme-loving investigative journalist on the case, Doge.
Wow, much waste, very wow.
He's sniffed out a whopping $2 trillion of your precious tax dollars being squandered on everything from fighter jets that can't fight to gas stations more expensive than a trip to the moon. We're talking about enough money to buy every single American a lifetime supply of chicken nuggets. Or, maybe invest in some actual useful things like, education, healthcare, or maybe even fixing that pothole that's been rattling your car's suspension for the last 6 months. But no, instead, your elected officials decided to flush it all down the toilet of bureaucratic incompetence, and frankly, we're not going to stand for it. So, buckle up, Buttercup, because over the next few videos, we're diving headfirst into this financial abyss, exposing the absurdity, the waste, and the sheer mind-boggling stupidity of it all. And who knows, maybe, just maybe, we can shame those responsible into actually doing their jobs for once. Don't hold your breath, though. It's the government we're talking about here. Alright, let's kick things off with a bang, or rather a very expensive whimper. Meet the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, the poster child for military overspending and the embodiment of everything wrong with government procurement. This flying money pit has set taxpayers back a cool $1.7 trillion. Yes, you heard that right, trillion with a T, and for what?
Well, that's a good question, because it turns out these supposed state-of-the-art fighter jets are about as effective as a wet paper bag in a hurricane.
Now, I'm no military strategist. My idea of a tactical maneuver is deciding which flavor of ice cream to get at the grocery store. But even I can see that dropping $1.7 trillion on a plane that's grounded more than it's airborne is a special kind of stupid. It's like buying a Ferrari that only runs on champagne and caviar, and then being surprised when you can't afford to fill up the tank. And speaking of filling up the tank, did I mention these bad boys cost a whopping $44,000 per hour to fly? That's more than most Americans make in a month, just to keep this hunk of metal in the air for 60 minutes. You could literally hire a fleet of private jets to fly circles around the F-35 for a fraction of the cost, and they'd probably have better in-flight entertainment to boot.
Such stealth, very broke.
Alright, now that we've got our blood pressure nice and elevated, let's take a quick trip over to Afghanistan, where the US government decided to build a gas station. Seems innocuous enough, right? Well, hold on to your hats, because this wasn't your average roadside rest stop. This, my friends, was a $43 million gas station. You heard me right, $43 million for a place to fill up your tank. Now, I know what you're thinking. Marty, maybe it was a really fancy gas station? Like, maybe it had a 5-star restaurant, a full-service spa, and a live-in masseuse for every pump attendant?
And to that I say, you're giving the US government way too much credit.
No, my friends, this gas station was about as basic as it gets, so how on earth do you spend $43 million on a glorified gas pump in the middle of the desert? Well, it seems like our good friends at the Pentagon decided to take a crash course in Afghan economics, because it turns out they built this gas station to sell propane at 80 times the local price.
Much fuel, very why.
Right, Camo. It's supposed to help you blend in, become one with your surroundings, like a chameleon, if chameleons were really bad at their jobs. Well, buckle up, because in 2021, the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction, or SIGAR, let's call it SIGAR because reading their reports is a truly exhausting experience anyway, they revealed the US military had spent a cool $28 million on forest camouflage uniforms for troops in, wait for it, the Afghan desert. The Afghan...
Such hide, very sand.
Afghanistan, that country where trees are about as common as a sober night out for Charlie Sheen. We essentially paid extra for our soldiers to look like misplaced shrubberies in a war zone. It's like showing up to a job interview at Goldman Sachs dressed as a Teletubby. Sure, you're technically wearing clothes, but you're definitely not blending in. And the best part? This wasn't some minor oversight. This was a multi-year procurement process involving numerous meetings, presentations, and presumably at least one PowerPoint that would make even the most hardened military officer question the life choices that led them to that moment.
So to recap, the US government, known for its fiscal responsibility, and that's me being sarcastic, folks, spent millions on camo that made our troops stick out like a vegan at a BBQ festival.
And honestly, Doge doesn't even begin to cover it. Ah, the border wall, a monument to division, xenophobia, and, as it turns out, shoddy construction. See, in 2024, a section of this big, beautiful wall, as a certain someone might call it, decided to embrace the laws of physics and gravity, and promptly collapsed.
Much wall, very oops.
Now, I'm no engineer, but even I know that walls are generally supposed to, stand up. That's kind of their whole. But apparently someone forgot to tell that to the contractors who built this particular section, who seemingly used a combination of chewing gum and hope to hold the whole thing together. And the best part? This masterpiece of modern engineering cost a cool $1.2 billion. That's billion with a B. For that price, you'd think they could have at least sprung for some decent concrete or maybe, consulted an engineer who wasn't also moonlighting as a clown at children's birthday parties.
And honestly, Oops doesn't even begin to cover the sheer incompetence on display here.
Alright folks, let's talk about logistics. Specifically, the US military's unique and utterly baffling approach to logistics. See, in the civilian world, when you ship something, you generally put the thing you're shipping, like a package or cargo or at the very least a strongly worded note. But apparently, the Pentagon missed that memo.
Such cargo, very oof.
Because according to a delightful little ditty from a 2023 Pentagon audit, the US military spent millions of dollars flying, wait for it, empty cargo planes. Yes, you heard that right. Empty. As in, devoid of anything remotely resembling cargo. It's like ordering a pizza and only getting the box. And honestly, oof doesn't even begin to cover the existential dread that sets in when you realize your tax dollars paid for this airborne absurdity. Alright, let's talk about ghosts.
Not the spooky kind, although this story is pretty terrifying in its own right.
We're talking about ghost hospitals in Afghanistan.
Now you might think a ghost hospital is where they treat phantom limb syndrome.
Sadly, it's much more depressing than that.
These are fully built, fully equipped hospitals paid for with your tax dollars that never saw a single patient.
That's right, folks. $500 million, enough to buy every single member of Congress a solid gold stethoscope, was spent on hospitals that were essentially abandoned before they even opened.
And the Special Inspector General for Afghanistan Reconstruction, or SIGAR, who, let's be honest, could have a full-time job just auditing this war, found that many of these hospitals were plagued by shoddy construction, lack of staff, and a disconcerting habit of just not being where anyone needed them.
So, we've all heard of getting a stimulus check, right?
A little something to help us through tough times.
But what if you got one and you weren't even supposed to?
I'm talking, of course, about the $1.2 billion in COVID relief funds that went straight into the pockets of incarcerated individuals.
Yes, you heard that right. While many of us were struggling to pay rent and buy groceries, the government accidentally sent out checks to prisoners, some of whom weren't even eligible for stimulus payments.
Now, I'm not saying prisoners shouldn't get any support, but $1 billion? That's more than the entire GDP of some small island nations.
You could have bought every inmate a lifetime supply of ramen noodles and still had enough left over for a few comfy chairs in the warden's office.
And the best part? The Justice Department knew about this little error for months before they actually did anything about it.
Months? That's like seeing a leaky faucet in your house and waiting until your basement's flooded before calling a plumber. Alright, let's talk about the VA.
Specifically, the VA's $10 billion electronic health record system, which has a success rate on par with me trying to assemble IKEA furniture after a bottle of tequila.
This system, which was supposed to streamline healthcare for veterans, has been plagued by problems from the start.
We're talking about crashes, glitches, lost records, the whole 9 yards. It's basically the technological equivalent of a dumpster fire in a hurricane.
Now you might be thinking, well, at least they're trying to modernize.
And to that I say sure, but at what cost?
Because this technological upgrade has actually made things worse for many veterans.
We're talking about delayed appointments, incorrect medications, and a level of bureaucratic chaos that would make Kafka blush.
It's enough to make you want to grab a typewriter and a stack of index cards and say, you know what? Let's just go back to the old way. All right, let's talk about fake farms. Not the ones in those charming children's books with talking animals, but the kind that sprout up solely to gobble up government funds like cows let loose in a subsidized cornfield.
In 2020, the US government, in its infinite wisdom, decided to throw a lifeline to small businesses struggling during the pandemic. This came in the form of the Paycheck Protection Program, or PPP loans. A noble idea, in theory. But as we've learned time and time again, throwing money at a problem rarely leads to a 5-star Yelp review.
Enter the farmers. Thousands of them, apparently. Except, upon closer inspection, a lot of these farms were about as real as my childhood pet unicorn, Sparkles.
We're talking names like Noodle Ranch LLC and Cash Cow Holdings. You know, subtle.
The Small Business Administration's Inspector General later found out that a whopping $1.4 billion in PPP loans went to these phantom farms money that could have gone to actual struggling businesses, like, say, a dairy farm run by a guy named Bob, who just wanted to keep his cows in hay and his employees paid.
Let's move on from phantom farms to a program near and dear to the hearts of millions of Americans, Medicare. It's supposed to help senior citizens afford health care, not line the pockets of fraudsters who wouldn't know a hip replacement from a hole in the ground.
But alas, here we are, staring down the barrel of a $100 billion annual loss due to Medicare fraud. That's billion with a B. To put that in perspective, that's enough money to buy every single person in Wyoming a lifetime supply of denture adhesive and still have enough left over for a moderately priced yacht.
Now this fraud takes many forms, from billing for services never rendered to peddling unnecessary medical equipment like it's going out of style. And these aren't exactly master criminals we're talking about. Some of their schemes are so brazen, so ludicrously transparent, you almost have to admire the audacity.
Take, for instance, the case of a Florida man who billed Medicare for $4.2 million worth of diabetic shoes. The catch? He ordered enough shoes to outfit every single person in Miami-Dade County with a spare pair for their pet iguana.
All right, buckle up, because we're about to delve into a tale of government waste so egregious, so mind-bogglingly stupid, it makes the fake farm fiasco look like a minor accounting error. I'm talking, of course, about the infamous Bridge to Nowhere.
In the early 2000s, the great state of Alaska, flush with more federal earmarks than common sense, decided to embark on a project of truly epic proportions. They were going to build a bridge. Not just any bridge, mind you, but a $398 million bridge connecting the small town of Ketchikan, population 8,000, to Gravina Island, population 50.
Now you might be wondering, what wonders awaited on Gravina Island that justified such a lavish expenditure? Was it a hidden utopia? A treasure trove of natural resources? A haven for endangered species? All right, let's talk about New York City's 2nd Avenue subway. This wasn't just a boondoggle, this was a multi-billion-dollar testament to bureaucratic incompetence so profound, it could make a grown man weep into a bodega bagel.
For decades, New Yorkers heard promises about this line, whispers of a glorious future with less crowded platforms and faster commutes.
And after decades of planning and construction, how much did this subterranean marvel end up costing per mile? If you guessed more than basically anything else ever constructed on this planet, you'd be alarmingly close.
We're talking $4.5 billion per mile, folks. That's enough money to buy every single New Yorker a year's supply of those little blue and white cookies they sell outside the Met. You know the ones.
And what did they get for this king's ransom of public funds? A train that's actually slower than the ones they were using in the 1930s. You heard me right. Your great-grandpa, riding the rails during the Great Depression, was getting around faster than someone using this supposed technological marvel.
Doge sums it up best, such speed, very snail. And honestly, at this point, I'd rather just ride a snail.
All right, let's move from the sweltering depths of the New York City subway system to the equally sweltering interiors of the United States Postal Service's brand spanking new delivery trucks.
Now you might be thinking, new mail trucks, John, that's not very exciting. And you'd be right, it's not.
But what is exciting, or rather deeply concerning, is the fact that these $6 billion behemoths of bureaucracy come equipped with one glaring omission: air conditioning.
Yes, you heard that right. The USPS, an organization known for delivering mail in rain, sleet, or snow, apparently draws the line at unbearable, face-melting heat.
They've essentially created mobile saunas, where the only thing getting delivered faster than the mail is heat stroke. And look, I'm no meteorologist, but I'm pretty sure when you're driving around in a metal box in the middle of summer in, say, Arizona, things are going to get a little toasty.
Doge puts it best, such mail very fry, and he's not wrong.
All right, next up on our taxpayer-funded greatest hits compilation, remember dial-up, that beautiful sound of 1,000 hamsters furiously powering your internet? Well, some folks in rural America are getting a taste of that nostalgia, but with a modern twist, a $200 million price tag.
That's right. For the low, low price of just $200 million of your hard-earned dollars, the FCC managed to bring broadband internet to a whopping 12 homes. You heard that right? 12. Not 12,000, not 1,200, just 12.
Wow, much internet, very dial-up.
You could have given each of those families $16 million and still had enough left over for a decent-sized yacht. But no, we went with the classic throw money at the problem and hope for the best approach. Spoiler alert, it didn't work.
To be fair, bringing reliable internet to remote areas is important, but this debacle feels less like bridging the digital divide and more like tripping over the Ethernet cable and landing face first in a pile of taxpayer cash.
And the best part? This wasn't even some shady backroom deal. This was a publicly funded FCC program. You know, the folks who are supposed to be looking out for the little guy, or in this case, the little guy who also happens to be a telecommunications giant with deep pockets and even deeper connections.
Look, I'm no tech expert, but I'm pretty sure you can get decent Wi-Fi at Starbucks for the price of an overpriced latte. Maybe they should have just given everyone in those 12 homes a lifetime supply of pumpkin spice lattes and called it a day.
But hey, who am I to judge? I'm just a guy with a platform and a deep-seated fear that our tax dollars are being used to fund the world's most elaborate game of SimCity, played by people who think a brownfield site is just a field that needs more fertilizer. So next time you're struggling with your internet connection, just remember, somewhere out there, 12 families are enjoying blazing fast speeds, all thanks to your generous contributions to the "we're not sure how to spend this money, but we're sure as hell gonna try" fund. Now let's talk infrastructure, baby. Roads, bridges, tunnels, the very arteries of this great nation. We all love a good infrastructure project, right? It's like watching a giant Lego set come to life, except instead of plastic bricks, it's steel beams and concrete. And instead of a satisfying click, it's the soul-crushing realization that it's billions of dollars over budget and decades behind schedule.
But hey, at least we're creating jobs, right? And by jobs, I mean highly paid consulting gigs for people who can explain why a bridge needs a feasibility study to determine if it's feasible to build a bridge.
We're talking about $1.2 trillion, with a T, spent on infrastructure consultants. That's more money than the GDP of several small countries combined, and for what? What are we getting for this eye-watering sum? Well, according to a recent GAO report, about $100 billion of that went to planning and design.
Now I'm all for planning. I'm a big believer in lists, schedules, and color-coded spreadsheets, but $100 billion worth of planning? That's a lot of whiteboards, folks. We're talking enough whiteboards to circle the Earth several times over. We could have built a bridge to the moon with that kind of money and probably still had enough left over for a toll booth.
Look, I get it. Infrastructure projects are complicated, but at some point, you have to stop talking about building and actually, build something. Otherwise, it's like hiring a personal trainer, paying them a small fortune, and then just sitting on the couch eating chips and discussing the theoretical benefits of exercise.
So, the next time you're stuck in traffic, staring at a pothole the size of a small moon, just remember, somewhere out there, A consultant is drafting a PowerPoint presentation explaining why fixing that pothole is a complex, multifaceted issue that requires further study. And they're billing you for it.
So there you have it, folks. Doge has sniffed out just a fraction of the $2 trillion dumpster fire that is government waste. And trust me, this is just the tip of the iceberg. We could do this all day, every day, for the rest of our lives, and we'd still only scratch the surface of this fiscal hellscape.
If Doge, a dog who communicates primarily through broken English and internet memes, can understand that this level of waste is unacceptable, then surely our elected officials can too, right? Right?
But hey, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is all just part of some grand economic strategy that I'm too simple to understand. Maybe there's a perfectly logical explanation for why we're spending billions on camo that doesn't camouflage and broadband that doesn't reach anyone. If that's the case, I encourage you to enlighten me.
Comment below with your most creative defense of government waste. Smash that like button if you think Doge deserves a Nobel Prize in economics. And subscribe, because unlike the IRS, we actually find your cash.
Stay tuned for our next episode. Doge V says $500 billion Pentagon audit fails. It's gonna be lit.